Am I the a-hole for wanting my husband to watch me give birth? Story. This happened 2 months ago, but it's still causing major friction in my family, so I need some outside opinions. I, 29F, and my husband Jake, 32M, have been together for 6 years, married for 3. We were both ecstatic when we found out we were expecting our first child. Pregnancy was tough for me, though. I had severe morning sickness, gestational diabetes, and was generally miserable. But Jake was supportive and sweet the whole way through, which made it bearable. As we got closer to my due date, we discussed birth plans. I was adamant that I wanted Jake in the delivery room. I needed his support, and he'd always agreed. However, a few weeks before my due date, Jake started acting strange. He was distant, distracted, and wouldn't engage in any baby-related discussions. I thought he was just anxious about becoming a dad, so I didn't press him too much. The day I went into labor, Jake drove me to the hospital but seemed off. He was quiet and kept checking his phone. When we got there, he pulled the nurse aside and spoke to her privately. She came back and told me Jake wouldn't be in the delivery room because he was uncomfortable with blood and medical procedures. I was stunned. He'd never mentioned this before. I begged him to stay, told him I needed him, but he just kept saying, "I can't do this." I was heartbroken and furious, but I didn't have much time to dwell on it as my contractions were getting stronger. Jake said he'd be in the waiting room and kissed me on the forehead before leaving. I was left alone, crying and feeling utterly abandoned. Labor was long, painful, and traumatic. I was alone the entire time except for the medical staff. When our son was finally born, I was exhausted, emotionally and physically. The nurse handed me my son, and all I felt was a deep sadness that Jake wasn't there to share this moment. After I was taken to a recovery room, I asked the nurse to get Jake. She came back and said he'd left the hospital hours ago. I couldn't believe it. I called him repeatedly, but he didn't answer. Finally, I sent him a text saying I was done and he could find his own way home. I didn't see him until the next day. He showed up at the hospital with flowers and an apology, saying he'd panicked and needed some air. He claimed he'd gone home to shower and change and fell asleep, which I didn't buy for a second. I told him I didn't believe him. I was overwhelmed with anger and hurt, and I told him he had let me down in the worst possible way. He kept apologizing, saying he knew he'd messed up and he'd do anything to make it right. I didn't want him near me or our son at that moment, so I asked him to leave. He tried to protest, but I told him I needed time to process everything. He left, and I spent the rest of my hospital stay alone with my baby, trying to grapple with the enormity of what had happened. Since then, Jake has been trying to make amends. He's been taking parenting classes, attending therapy, and is constantly trying to be present and supportive. But I can't shake the feeling of betrayal. He abandoned me at one of the most vulnerable moments of my life. Every time I look at him, I remember being alone in that delivery room, terrified and in pain, wondering why the person who promised to be by my side wasn't there. My family is split. Some think I'm being too hard on Jake, that he made a mistake and is clearly remorseful. They say he's a good father and partner otherwise, and I should focus on moving forward for the sake of our child. Others think what he did was unforgivable and I should leave him. They believe I'll never truly trust him again, and that's no foundation for a marriage. I'm torn. I do still love him, and I know he loves me and our son. But part of me wonders if I'll ever get over this. Was it just a moment of weakness on his part, or a sign of something deeper that I can't overlook? So, am I the a-hole for leaving him at the hospital and now considering leaving him for good? Response 1. But he didn't only bail on the delivery, did he? He bailed on the entire hospital. Didn't even bother leaving you a message, then he ghosted you. What the actual? Most of the things that go wrong in pregnancy go wrong in the last few hours of it. How could he have been contacted if you or your son was in a life-threatening situation or worse? Even if I bought the idea that he was so squeamish he couldn't deal, in which case he should have mentioned that long before you went into labor. There are ways he could have supported you up to the last minute and returned 10 or 15 minutes later. He could have just stepped out of the delivery room itself, briefly. He didn't. He had a choice. You didn't. He made an appallingly bad choice about one of the most crucial events you or he will experience, and he wasn't in there at all. As a minimum, he's an abject coward, but I suspect he's also lying. I think you're right that there's more to this. I'm so sorry. Reply 1. He was acting shifty for weeks before the birth. He knew weeks beforehand that he was going to bail on her. If he had been honest with her, she could have made arrangements to have someone else with her at the hospital. He probably left as soon as he was out of sight. If something had gone wrong, she would have died alone in the hospital because her husband is a coward. Reply 2. This reminds me of an aita post where a guy that cheated previously left his wife in labor at the hospital to see his ex-girlfriend, and then ex-girlfriend sent a Ring doorbell video to the girlfriend in labor. Why would he leave the whole hospital and then not have his phone? Back with flowers and an apology that he will do anything? Checking his phone repeatedly in the car on the way to the hospital? I feel like this story is worse than what we currently know, but maybe I'm just jaded. Reply 3. I want to see his phone and know where he went. He straight up abandoned her. I can't believe he left the hospital hours ago. Reply 4. I also thought that part was suspicious. That he kept checking his phone and that he didn't even stay for the labor. Sounds like he said he'd be in the waiting room and left right after. And his behavior changed weeks before she delivered, which makes me think he's cheating, which is why he'd been distant. Maybe his new side piece didn't want him to see his baby come into the world. Who knows? But it sounds like more than him just suddenly being unable to handle it. Reply 5. For real. Think about the things that could go wrong during labor and delivery, and to just not care? Birth is one of the top causes of death for women. He could have sat in the waiting room, by her head, in his car. Literally anything but what he did. I would never forgive this man. He has bad intentions and will do some shady crap again for sure. P.S. I'm still bitter from when I was 8 HRs in, not allowed to eat, and my a-hole husband goes, "Damn, I'm hungry. Do you care if I get food?" It made me cry in the moment, and I was so pissed. Looking back, it makes me chuckle, but I wanted to strangle him for that. Response 2. He kept checking his phone while you were in labor, and then did a disappearing act. Yeah, those people in your life who say he is a good father and partner need to be asking, who had his unwavering attention to the point he abandoned you and your child? I would be checking his phone/computer and past behavior for answers. Reply 1, my thoughts too. That checking his phone constantly, like he had to be somewhere by a certain time. If she can check his locations, see where he was and where he went after, who doesn't want to meet their child for a day? Who doesn't check and make sure their child and wife even made it through delivery alive? Reply 2. Some of my friends suspect he might have been with another woman somewhere far, making it hard for him to even come same day. He came back over 24 hours after I gave birth. Reply 3. Just something to think over. Who was your power of attorney if anything went wrong? Who was going to advocate for you and your son? What were your plans for if something did go wrong, and who knew them? If it was your husband, then he not only left as he was scared, but he left all your prior decisions in the rear view behind him and left both of your health in other people's hands. Reply 4. This was my gut reaction as well. I deeply believe he probably has something else going on. And if so, he's the worst of the worst, using your most vulnerable and beautiful moment, the birth of his own son, to spend time with someone else. He needs to be kicked to the curb. Reply 5. Gut reaction says the same, but even if he wasn't cheating, leaving you in labor, he cheated you out of feeling safe and supported. He robbed you of your trust in him. He cheated you out of feeling like someone was with you to advocate for you. He cheated you out of a happy birthing experience. He robbed you of support and comfort of the day a woman needs it most. He cheated you out of a normal married delivery experience and seems to think he can make up for it. You need to decide right now if he could even possibly ever make up for it. Can he ever rebuild trust? If you got cancer or some other major disease or a diagnosis, will he abandon you again? With a child this time, will he flee the hospital if you get in an accident? Will he go AWOL if your child is ever hurt? Can you even trust him to be there if your most dire hour anymore? You could have died. Your child could have died. Imagine all that grief you would have bore alone. He needs to realize that this may be unforgivable, and it should be unforgivable. You could have died. If you want to move on with him, get into couples counseling and get a backup emergency contact as soon as possible. Personally, though, I would never be able to trust my partner ever again. Response 3. The thing is, where did he disappear to? He totally left the hospital. I don't know if I'd be able to trust him, and what if a serious issue arises in the future? Hopefully not. Will he abandon you then and just apologize again? Response 4. NTA. Only you know the details of what your marriage is truly like. But in your shoes, I'd have given the nurse a note to give him in the hospital that he was to be completely moved out before baby and I came home. What he did is unforgivable, and it lets you know that in the future, when your health and safety are on the line, he won't be there. Reply 1. Yeah? So there's this statistic that says that a logger percentage of men leave/divorce their spouse if they get cancer, compared to the percentage of women that do the same. Knowing how he behaved, OP's husband would 100% leave her if she got cancer and started attending treatments at the hospital because he would be uncomfortable. And obviously, even when the other person is in pain, his comfort is all that matters. Think about that, OP. If, God forbid, you have a medical issue in the future, like cancer, can you 100% trust that he won't just abandon you as you're dealing with that? That he won't just leave you alone because he just can't deal? Do you want to be with a man who would abandon you during such a time? If you can't trust that he would stay with you if you got cancer and are going through treatments, then that's your answer. Obviously, you shouldn't be with a man that you can't depend on during the most difficult moment of your life. Reply 2. This right here is what got me OP. He didn't inform anyone of your family to accompany you and support you when you were facing everything alone. It's okay to freak out, but holy hell, you could have died. He has no idea how lucky he is to have access to be with you in the labor room, and he threw that away. Yes, panicking is okay. Being overwhelmed is okay. But for F's sake, you were trying to give birth to your child with him. And he didn't even bother to answer the phone? Who TF leaves hospital when their wife giving birth? If this is how he act with labor, if I were you, I won't be able to trust him for the times I might need to have his support at other part of life, like the ones in the vow, maybe the good and the bad through sickness and health. Because he couldn't even bring himself to support you while you're giving birth to your child. I am so sorry you go through this, OP, but please know that your feelings are valid, and whoever told you to let it go needs some la shankla in their lives. Tell them how would they feel if when they need their partner the most, their partner just withdraws instead of supporting them. Response 5. Why did he keep checking his phone? That's totally sus to me. I think there was more going on than showers and sleep. Reply 1. We all think so too, but since there's no evidence and he's not speaking, we're all going on several assumptions. Reply 2. His not speaking and effing off is the proof. He's not talking to anyone because there's no way he'd be able to cover up where he was if really pressed. You need to know one key thing. The first temporary order of custody in a divorce almost always dictates the rest of the divorce proceedings. Get a top-of-the-line divorce attorney to file for you immediately and slam the F out of your STBX while he's still on the run. Lock crap down and use his behavior to get sole custody. A man that abandons his wife as she gives birth has proven he cannot be responsible for an infant. Get an attorney that will be aggressive out of the gate. Don't give your STBX any room to come back and ask for shared custody. Hit while the iron is hot. Judges hate a-holes like this. Don't give him time to rehabilitate his image. Reply 3. Phone company can be subpoenaed for numbers called or texted during your TIM and labor, as well as GPS info in some cases. Reply 4. Whether he's cheating or not, you might never know, but one assumption I can guarantee you is correct is that this man is one of the ones who will leave you as soon as you have a health issue that requires him to be the caregiver. Not sure if you are aware of this statistic, that when a man gets sick, his wife will be his caregiver. But when a woman gets sick, her husband will leave her for someone he doesn't have to take care of. This is especially true for the elderly, which is so sad that after spending an entire lifetime taking care of a man, he can so easily abandon his wife who he supposedly loves. Like I said, you'll never know if he's cheating, but you know he will not be there for you when it comes to anything medical. I just couldn't spend my life with someone knowing that, and you shouldn't have to either. Reply 5. Him not speaking, changing his phone password, and being glued to his phone is evidence enough. Him showing up over 24 hours after the birth and said it was from oversleeping is enough. My wife and I have 2 kids, and what he did is unthinkable to me. Like I'm trying to play all my if-ups in my head, and any time I've been absurdly late to something or even overslept, I cannot even fathom showing up that late. There is no way in hell that overslept for 24 hours. He's so full of crap. Response 6, NTA. He didn't just leave the room, he left the hospital. If something had gone wrong, he wouldn't have even been there to make time-critical decisions. You now know that you can never rely on him or trust him alone with your child, because if your son trips over, he could very well get in his car and drive away. What is wrong with your family? If my husband did what yours did, they'd be up in arms about me ever speaking to him again, not encouraging me to forgive a person who abandoned both mother and child. He is not a good father, let alone a good partner. Get away from him and insist that he only has supervised visitation due to his clear inability to be a parent. Response 7, NTA. I would never ever be able to get past this, ever. He's shown you that when push comes to shove, he thinks of only himself, not you and not your child. Response 8, NTA. This would be a step too far for me. He had 9 months to prepare for this. If he genuinely has this issue with blood and medical procedures, there was time for counseling or therapy. Even if the fear couldn't be overcome, you would have had time to organize a backup plan for a support person. As it was, he did this in the worst way possible, by not only leaving the room, but leaving the entire hospital and going into hiding. Personally, in your position, I wouldn't have him back at all. Not just because he wasn't at the birth, but because of the way it happened, which left you abandoned with nobody at the most vulnerable moment of your life. There could have been an emergency. Women and babies still die during childbirth more often than you might think, and he wouldn't have been there for either of you. Response 9, NTA. I'm a man, and I think what he did was unforgivable. If he can't be there for you in hospital at birth of his child, when can he? In my eyes, is a pathetic excuse for a human being, not worthy calling a man. Response 10. So the person he was cheating on you with got tired of the game when you went into labor, and he left to confess his love for them and got denied, so he crawled back to you with some flowers. If you think that this isn't possible and he loves you too much to do that to you, think again. If he loved you that much, he wouldn't have abandoned you when you needed him most. How could you ever trust him to be there for you or your kid again, ever? The second he left you there, the way that he did and caused your delivery to be worse, is the second the marriage was over. You're only still married on paper. Women and babies die in childbirth even today. He added to the possibility by causing you emotional distress right before delivery, not the a-hole. Response 11, NTA. I would divorce him. 1. He knew about this problem way in advance but didn't share it. This caused you to have no one to support you. 2. He wasn't even available to see the child when it was born or check in on you. 3. It seems he didn't do anything to address the problem. Point 4. He decided his discomfort was more important than your discomfort or even your life. It would have been possible that something would have gone wrong, and if you weren't able, there wasn't anyone able to make a medical decision. Reply 1. My mom insisted she had to come, but he made me feel like he had it covered, and she could just come when the baby was born. He had other plans. Reply 2. This might be the part that gets me angriest. The lost opportunity of having your mom there. I knew a guy that would sometimes ghost me until I told him, I don't give an F what you're doing, give me my time back. Be courteous and tell me so I can do something else with my time. Dudes like that suck. Not thinking about anyone else? Reply 3. Okay, him Tilda. Actively preventing Tilda you from having any support. He knew weeks before he wouldn't be there is so cruel. He could at least have let you have your mom if he considered you were worthy of any respect. I'm sorry for you. I'm glad you have your sister's support and wish you and your baby all the best. Reply 4. Nah, hell no, a-holes here. That knowledge alone would make me leave yesterday. He knowingly knew he wouldn't be your support and still refused to allow anyone else to support you. Double down on the disrespect and selfishness. Response 12. Yo, no one deserves to feel abandoned, especially when you're literally bringing life into the world. I get he panicked, but the damage is done. Take care of you first. Response 13. You didn't have the option to panic and take a break to get some air. The baby that you both made together was ready to come out, and he left you without any concern for your well-being or your child's. This is truly disgusting, and I don't know that I could get past it. I certainly could never trust him again or have any more kids with him. But what happens at the next major life event that he can't deal with? He panics, and you're alone to deal with the fallout. He sounds like a horrible life partner. Response 14. How can you ever trust him again? #1. He lied and broke promises during an important event and left you with absolutely no support. #2. If what he says is actually true about blood in hospitals, then neither you or your child would be safe if injured/needing medical care while with him. But what I'm stuck on is #3. What was so interesting about his phone during the lead up to this? Who did he actually go see when he went missing while you were scared and alone? Because that seemed like cheater behavior to me. Response 15. NTA. However, I would leave him. He showed you his true color by abandoning you in your most vulnerable time, when you needed his support the most. I don't know any men who stay with their partner during birth, and don't think that's disgusting with the blood and sometimes other things. They don't stay to watch their partner hooked up to 10000 monitors and in pain because they enjoy it. They stay to support and help their partners throughout the birth, be there to help and support through the pain, and meet their child. He deprived you of this experience. Your husband abandoned you in your time of need when you needed him, and he gave you no choice. He didn't even have the balls to let you know in person or the decency to discuss it with you in person beforehand. And also, what was his excuse for leaving the hospital at all? Who cares if he showered or not? Seems odd that he fell asleep and couldn't be reached. Something is amiss. Leave with your son. Your husband doesn't have your back, and there seems to be something else going on. Any men would have showered and come back right away to not miss anything. He could have slept in the waiting room. The fact he fell asleep means he was laying down or sitting at home after his shower. Reply 1. I'm leaving in a few weeks with my child to my mama's. I guess he needs time to concentrate on his phone. Reply 2. Can you stay with your sister who supports you leaving him? I suspect your mom will chip away at your commitment to end the marriage because she's sympathetic to him and is probably of the mentality that moms have to sacrifice everything for their family. Response 16. You had discussed your birth plan, and he had previously agreed to support you in the delivery room. His last-minute refusal to be there was a significant breach of trust, especially during such an emotional time. Response 17. In my culture, there is a saying that giving birth is like having a foot in the realm of death. You don't know what can go wrong. Even if he couldn't be in the delivery room with you, he needed to be in the hospital in case they needed his signature or permission for whatever situations. He literally abandoned you and his child. I have a sister who I helped take care of during the COVID lockdown. I made myself very clear with her husband that if he ever thought of not being around her, I would go as far as I can to make sure his life turned hell.